Obesity. Obesity is defined as excess fat accumulation with multiple organ-specific pathologic consequences and an increased number of fat cells. The main symptom of obesity is a BMI over 30. BMI is calculated as weight divided by height squared. As you can see on the graph, a healthy BMI would extend from 18.5 to 25. 25 to 30 would be overweight, and a BMI exceeding 30 would be considered obese. Obesity is a mismatched disease as a result of evolution. Large amounts of energy were required for our lifestyle originally. However, as our environment and lifestyle have changed, our fat storage mechanisms have remained the same. There are two types of obesity based on the distribution of fat, also known as adipose tissue. Upper body obesity is shaped like an apple with excess fat in the abdominal region and referred to as central abdominal or android obesity. Lower body obesity being shaped like a pear with excess fat in the hips or thighs. This is referred to as peripheral gluteofemoral or gynoid obesity. The presence of disproportionate body fat determines certain risk factors.
Some of the risk factors are inactivity, unhealthy lifestyle, medications, social and economic status, age, lack of sleep, genetics, the mutation of the BRCA1 and 2 genes are believed to be involved, and diet. People with obesity have a higher incidence of arterial sclerosis, heart disease, and hypertension.
Energy input must equal energy output. The energy being consumed in the foods we eat and the energy output being the energy lost as heat, work, and/or energy stored as fat or glycogen. An increased food intake combined with sedentary lifestyle contributes to obesity. This is because of low energy expelled and higher energy consumed, leading to a higher carbohydrate to fat oxidation ratio, suggesting that they are oxidizing more carbohydrates than fat. If there is an imbalance between the input and output of energy, homeostasis is being disrupted. Increased consumption of food that exceeds the amount of energy required by the body will then be stored as fat. The excess body fat will then lead to the main symptom of obesity, a body mass index exceeding 30.
Insulin is released from your pancreas in response to rising glucose in your bloodstream. After you eat a meal, any carbohydrates you've eaten are broken down into glucose and passed into the bloodstream. The pancreas detects this rise in glucose and starts to secrete insulin. Insulin will then bind to the insulin protein receptors and activate the GLUT4 receptor, which are mostly found in adipose cells. GLUT4 receptors will then be activated to bring glucose into. With obesity, a person can have excess glucose and insulin in the bloodstream, possibly due to a high carbohydrate intake. Our cells are stimulated by the insulin to take glucose into our cells. The glucose will then be converted with hexokinase, an enzyme, into a fatty acid. The fatty acid is converted with glycerol phosphate into a triglyceride. The triglyceride is then stored as fat if it is not used as energy. A potential symptom of excess fat in the body is diabetes. Cells can become resistant to the effects of insulin, which makes the pancreas secrete more insulin to allow more glucose into the cells. Normally, the pancreas secretes insulin. Insulin then tells the fat to pick up glucose. Therefore, in obesity, the overstimulation of the pancreas results in increased insulin secretion and increased fat storage. Recent studies suggest that bacteria in the large intestine can be a contributing factor for both obesity and diabetes. Combinations of these bacteria alter the storage of fat and glucose regulation in the blood and also hormonal responses.
Body weight is regulated by an equal portion of energy intake and energy output, and is controlled by the physiological feedback mechanism between the stomach, intestines, and the brain, which regulates hunger and food intake. The arcuate nucleus of the hypothalamus is the main control center to regulate the feelings of hunger and satiety. It processes information received from the gastrointestinal tract, stomach, and blood, and then proceeds to regulate metabolism. The regulation of food intake is regulated by short-term and long-term. Short-term regulation is the amount of food consumed in one meal, and long-term regulation being the storage of energy over time. Ghrelin and leptin, the hormone proteins that regulate appetite and hunger. Ghrelin hormone is secreted mainly by the stomach when the stomach is empty. From the stomach, it goes to the blood, where it crosses the blood-brain barrier to the arcuate nucleus of the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus then conveys the message to the body to increase appetite. Therefore, ghrelin is high before you eat and low after you eat. The opposing hormone to ghrelin is leptin. Leptin hormone is secreted by adipocytes, where like ghrelin, it then enters the blood and crosses the blood-brain barrier, where it binds to the receptors of the arcuate nucleus of the hypothalamus that suppresses the release of NPY and stimulate the release of CART. NPY stimulates appetite, blocking the release of NPY, which inhibits appetite. Current research suggests that when adipocytes release leptin, the C-reactive protein, which is the blood test marker for the inflammation, then binds to the leptin in the blood, thus making transport of leptin across the blood-brain barrier difficult. Due to leptin not being able to cross the blood-brain barrier, this blocks the release of NPY. This interferes with the message transmission to the brain and is unable to relay the message to turn off appetite, which then leads to one always feeling hungry, which further leads to overeating and weight gain.
In summary, obesity is a mismatched disease. There are two types of obesity. The risk factors include genetics, lifestyle, medications, and lack of sleep. The main symptom of obesity is a BMI exceeding 30 due to the increased input and decreased output disrupting homeostasis. Overeating is due to leptin resistance, and a high carbohydrate intake results in excess glucose and insulin in the bloodstream.